Hey everybody! Today we're going to do a little maintenance on my 1988 BMW R100RT. I was a little late getting the bike out of storage this spring, and I'm really excited to start riding. There's just a few things I need to deal with first. To fill you in a little bit, I purchased this motorcycle about 5 years ago after it sat untouched for something like 15 years. The guy I bought it from was planning on doing a cafe conversion on it, but lucky for all of us, that never happened. The first thing we're going to deal with is this oil leak that seems to be coming from around my drain plug. I've never had oil covering the bottom of the engine like that before. The copper washer seems to be deformed. That must have happened at some time last season, or I guess maybe when I put the drain plug in on the last oil change. The oil level has always been good when I checked it, so it must have been a pretty slow leak. I've got a new crush washer to replace it, and I guess I better plan to clean things up, I don't know, maybe one evening after work. The washer seems to have seated properly. I'll just have to keep an eye on it over the next few weeks. Once it's been cleaned, it will be a lot easier to spot a leak. I've been in the habit of changing the oil filter every other year. In this case, the bike is an 88, so I'll do that on even-numbered years. My riding season is shared by two bikes, so although I ride a fair bit, it really doesn't get all that many kilometers put on it. In this case, it's only been a bit more than 3,200 kilometers since the last change, which really isn't very much. I just can't see the need to change it any more often than every second year. It's really important that you use new gaskets when changing the oil filter, and it's equally important that they are installed properly. My parts supplier includes all the gaskets as a kit that comes with the filter. Next, I'll take a few minutes to check the valves. It's really a critical part of any Airhead's maintenance procedure, and honestly, it's not very hard to do. I'll start by pulling off both valve covers. You know, it seems no matter how many times I do this, I'm always caught off guard by the small accumulation of oil that leaks out when they come off. If you can think of it, put a container under the head and be ready for it. It'll save you a cleanup later. The engine needs to be stone cold and positioned to top dead center on the left cylinder before you can get going on this. With the bike on the center stand and the spark plugs removed, I put the bike in at least third gear, ideally fourth or fifth, and I kind of jog the pistons around until I can see this OT mark through the side inspection hole. At this point, there should be a little bit of play between the rocker arm and the valve stem. My bike came with two feeler gauges that I keep in the toolkit. The exhaust gets set to 0.2 millimeters and the intake to 0.1 millimeters. I like to keep them just a bit on the loose side because loud valves are happy valves. Tight valves, which have little or no clearance, will inevitably overheat and burn out the seats or possibly damage your heads. This is an expensive fix that can easily be avoided. Once the left side is wrapped up, the engine has to be rotated 180 degrees before the right side can be adjusted. I just bump the tire a bit more and wait for both valves to get a bit of slack in them. A popsicle stick can be slid through the spark plug hole to confirm the top of the piston is at the top of its stroke. The next item on my list is also close to being critical and pretty easy to do. I think a lot of people overlook it and then find themselves in trouble later on. If you look closely at where the exhaust threads join the head, you'll see that this head was repaired with an aluminum weld that the previous owner must have done. The reason it's there is because that fin nut that connects the exhaust pipe to the head had seized in place and the head had cracked when it was forced off. To prevent that, it's a good idea to remove the nut every season and spread a little bit of this copper anti-seize on the threads before retightening. If you have an exhaust nut that won't come off, you're much better off to carefully cut it off than try to force it. Replacements are relatively cheap and pretty easy to come by. There's a few different styles of these removal tools. If you plan on owning one of these bikes, it's a real worthwhile thing to pick up. I believe one tool fits all Airheads. The best way to loosen this nut is with a sharp wrap on the tool handle with a piece of wood. Once again, don't force it. I like to put the anti-seize compound on in big blobs and then spin the nut in and out a few times to spread it evenly throughout the threads. Be very careful not to over-tighten when putting it back on. Those are just aluminum threads and it really won't take that much to damage them. This might sound kind of crazy, but if I have to grunt when I tighten, then I'm probably tightening too much. This motorcycle has had the oil cooler removed, so an oil and filter change is roughly 2¼ liters. I'll check it and top it up as needed once I get the bike warmed up for the first time. In my opinion, a bike of this era was engineered to use traditional dyno oils rather than synthetics. I personally like this Castrol 2050 motorcycle oil, mostly because it's readily available and because it hasn't failed me yet. What oil you put into your bike is completely up to you. Another decision I've made is to add small inline filters to the fuel lines. There are screens inside the gas tank, but I've noticed that fine particulates still make it through. My float bowls have been spotless ever since I've added these filters. The final tank of fuel from last season was treated with sea foam and the carburetor float bowls were drained when I put the bike away for the winter. There's some gas stains on them, which means it's probably time to replace the cork gaskets and make sure that the overflow and enriching jets are open. I live in Canada, so most of my parts have to come in from out of country, which can be a rather slow and painful process in riding season, so I keep a lot of spares on hand to minimize my downtime. It's my opinion that everybody should do as much of their own maintenance and simple repairs as they can. Together with keeping your bike clean, you will learn to understand your motorcycle better and be able to diagnose issues on your own when they arise. Ultimately, it will make your overall riding experience a lot more enjoyable. The wire standoff for my side stand broke off quite a while ago. It makes putting the bike on the stand a lot easier. I've patched it up a few times in the past with limited success. This time I'm going to clean things up and give it a more thorough welding job to make sure it stays in place. Alright, with all that done, I think it's time to clean up the bike and go for a spin. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe to my channel. There are a few more videos of this motorcycle in the works. Okay, thanks for watching.